Let's talk about another of the pivotal moments in the Monday Night Wars, which was the Montreal Screwjob and Bret leaving WWE and coming to WCW, which was huge at the time because Bret was, if not the most popular wrestler in the WWE, top 2 or 3 at the time. What were your discussions with Bret? What led to Bret leaving in the first place? I know it's been talked about for years, but I want to hear it. And since I'm up here, that's the question that I'm asking.
Do you want to go first, Bruce? I had, and again, I don't recall dates. Specifics. But I had a conversation with Bret about a year previously, I believe, year and a half. Got along great with Bret. I think I met him in L.A. We met at a hotel, and I liked him. He just felt like a real down-to-earth person to me, and he obviously was a great performer and a great character. I looked up to him in that respect, and we got along really well. But for whatever reason, we didn't do a deal, and it wasn't because I didn't offer him enough money. There was no animosity or tension. It was just we agreed that it was probably not a good opportunity, and we went our separate ways. And then we started talking again. I don't remember if he called me or I called him. He probably would have called me by that time because I was getting my ass kicked legally for a lot of other things that I had been doing. So by that time, I was very cautious about infringing in any way on WWF contracts. So I would assume Bret called me and we met again and we talked. We talked over the phone a lot, and he decided to make the move. And I remember I was in Wyoming when I had the conversation. I actually remember exactly where I was standing when I was on the phone with him. And he asked me about bringing a belt, and should I bring that with me? And I said, not necessary. And it was, well, what if they want me to drop the belt? Do you drop the belt? It's okay. You're Bret Hart. You're not Bret Hart the belt. You're Bret Hart. People will still know who you are and respect you and want to watch you, whether you have the belt or not, or you drop it in a match. It didn't matter to me. But that was the thinking.
You didn't think about, considering that you'd done that already with Medusa, about having Bret come on TV with the WWF title?
No, by that time we were engaged in federal litigation, and, copyright infringement, and all kinds of other crap. Even if I would have wanted to do it, I would have an army full of attorneys from Turner Broadcasting that would have stomped a mud hole in me.
Bret, he did. Eric, they had talked like a year before, and it was at a time when Bret's contract was coming up. Vince offered Bret a very lucrative contract, paying him the most money of anybody he'd ever paid before in the history of the company. And as he got into it, Bret wasn't happy. And it went on and on and on. And then it got to the point where Vince was paying him so much money and looking at this going, I can't continue to do this anymore. And he went to Bret and he said, look, if the deal's still on the table for WCW, or if you want to use me as leverage for WCW, you have my blessing to go back to them, get the best deal that you can, and, tell them you're in a bidding war, whatever you want to do. And so that's how the second one of Bret actually leaving came about on the WWF side. But Bret going into Montreal, it just was a difficult time. The animosity between Bret and Shawn at the time, and going back and forth, debating what we were going to do for that finish. And Vince deciding, whatever the night before, and told very few people and did what he needed to do because he wasn't confident.
Did you know about it? Did you know about it, Bruce?
No.
So you were surprised as everybody.
I was just sitting there with Davey Boy and Owen, and Davey looking at the monitor going, they just fucked him. On, they fucked him. What do we do?
Bruce, let me ask you, if Vince would have known, I don't mean to take over the moderator, if Vince would have known, because there's no way he could have gotten inside of my head and known the pressure I was under legally, he wouldn't have been able to know that there was no, I told Bret not to worry about the belt. Do you think he would have done it anyway? If he would have known that I had no intention to use that or to take the belt,
yeah, because that was Bret's last night, and the belt needed to change hands from Bret to Shawn storyline-wise. To do everything that we wanted to do with Austin and everybody going forward, that needed to happen. And just to have Shawn win it some other way, and it took on a life of its own afterwards and got even better. But, yeah, I think he still would have done it because Bret, I don't know that Bret he wasn't really rational at the time in a lot of respects. He has so much shit going on in his head, and I think if Bret were the Bret of 10 years before, never would have gotten to that point.
Here's an interesting question. What was your perspective of that when you heard about it? We've never heard from your side. You know you've got this guy coming in, one of the biggest names in the business, and hear about the Montreal screw job.
I actually heard about it from Rick Rude about 5 minutes after it happened. Rick Rude was in the locker room, I believe, or near it, and knew that Bret had knocked out Vince or whatever he did, dropped him, and Rude was pissed. Rude was pissed that they screwed Bret. Rick Rude called me and said, "Can I come to work tomorrow for you?" And then he told me what happened. I was shocked, but it didn't affect the way I looked at anything. It didn't affect the way I looked at Bret. It didn't affect the way I thought we would be able to utilize Bret, because I wasn't dependent upon him winning and keeping the belt, coming over as the former champion anyway. So in many respects, it didn't matter from that perspective. But the fact that they did it the way they did it, I was pretty shocked that it would happen.
So much momentum for WCW at this point in time, and I believe we were discussing it earlier. It was either 81 weeks, 88 weeks, something in the 80s, over a year and a half of WCW destroying Raw. And then, you know, Bret leaves, and even little things like Rude leaving, because everybody was leaving and Eric would hire them. We used to laugh as like, if you worked for Vince, Eric will hire you. Virgil shows up, and Michael Wall Street is there, and Bryan Adams is there, and Neidhart is there, and Davey shows up, and you know everybody's coming over. Are you guys reeling right now? Did you think, like, what can we do? What's going to happen? How low can we go? What's going on in the office at this point?
Around the Montreal Screwjob time?
Because that was at the point where WWE, I think, was at its lowest, because everybody now can't wait to go to WCW.
Well, yes and no, but see, also what was happening, television-wise, we were getting our ass kicked. But in the arena business, we were packing them in. Merchandising, we were packing them in. Success begets success. And with Nitro's success, just that helped us even more, because wrestling was hot again. And so while they were kicking our ass in the ratings, and they were just stopping a mud hole in us, underneath that arena business and all the other ancillaries, they were growing, and it was really good. But Montreal, it was kind of afterwards, it was like a fresh beginning in many ways, because you had Bret kind of last holdout to go to WCW. You had Shawn, who really didn't have his buddies anymore. You know, Scott and Big Kev were gone, and all he had was Hunter, and Hunter wasn't the political powerhouse he is now. And Shawn knew that at WrestleMania that year, he was gone. He was done. He was going to go away. So underneath all that, there was this groundswell of younger guys and guys that hadn't had as much TV time that were getting noticed. And you had this guy, Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was getting red hot. And then the big turning point was the baddest man on the planet, Mike Tyson, shows up on Raw. And we just had momentum. We just started gaining momentum once we took a commentator historically for the WWF his entire career and said, "Hey, folks, he's the owner of the company." And Bret Hart punched him out in the locker room. And he sits there with his pale black eyes.
Kind of sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah. And he sits there with his pale black eyes and says, "Bret screwed Bret." It does. You're right. Because we realized we had to change. You know, it's like, okay, well, let's make some changes here, do something different.
In perspective, I'm going to go back and to answer in part the question you asked, because it just occurred to me as you guys were talking to put it in to put Bret in context in what he was going through and what we were faced with. I was in Los Angeles the night Owen died. We were scheduled to do Jay Leno the following day. Bret was on his way to LA to meet me to do the Leno show so I could push him. I heard about Owen while I was at the hotel on a phone call because I couldn't watch pay-per-view at a hotel. Heard about it. I went to the airport to meet Bret because he was literally in the air. And I was thinking, I'm going to have to tell Bret what happened because he's in an airplane. How's he going to get the news? This was before you could, they didn't have wireless on planes back then. That's how our relationship started. That's where Bret started with WCW. So that was the starting point, just to put that in context. And what Bruce is saying, that's also when we started feeling the power shift. When that situation happened with Bret and it got physical, and then he brought Vince out, and all of a sudden he's no longer just the announcer with a padded suit. He's the owner, and it was Mike Tyson, and it was Steve Austin. I said, oh shit, we're in trouble now.